The warehouse was unusually quiet that Monday morning. Forklifts moved slowly between towering shelves. Workers scanned packages without saying much. Everyone knew something was different. A new regional manager had arrived just a week earlier, and since then, the atmosphere had become tense. In the middle of the loading dock, Ethan Walker adjusted the collar of his faded blue work shirt. At 40 years old, Ethan wasn't the loudest employee. He wasn't the type to complain. For 12 years he had shown up before sunrise, worked overtime without being asked, and never missed a deadline. His co-workers respected him, not because of his title, but because whenever something went wrong, Ethan always knew how to fix it. To many of the younger employees, he was the person they turned to when nobody else had the answer. Yet outside the warehouse, life wasn't nearly as stable. Every morning before work, Ethan woke up at 5. He made breakfast, packed a lunchbox, braided his 8-year-old daughter Lily's hair, walked her to the school bus. Only then did he drive to work. Since losing his wife 4 years earlier to cancer, every responsibility had fallen on his shoulders. Father, mother, provider, protector. Some days he barely slept, but Lily had never once heard him complain. She simply believed her dad could fix anything. At exactly 9:12 a.m., a voice echoed across the warehouse. Ethan Walker. It was Greg Harrison, the company's new regional manager. Standing beside him were 2 HR representatives. Every conversation stopped. Employees looked up from their stations. Greg didn't smile. "Come to my office." The walk felt longer than usual. Dozens of eyes followed Ethan. Some workers exchanged worried glances. No one knew why HR was involved. Inside the office, Greg didn't ask Ethan to sit down. Instead, he slid a white envelope across the desk. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately." Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry." "Could you repeat that?" Greg folded his arms. "Your position has been eliminated. There will be no transition period. You'll collect your personal belongings today." Ethan stared at the envelope. 12 years. "And this is how it ends?" Greg shrugged. "It's just business." Ethan took a slow breath. "I've never received a warning. No disciplinary action. My performance reviews have always been excellent." Greg interrupted. "The decision is final." One HR representative looked uncomfortable. She quietly lowered her eyes. Even she knew. This wasn't how loyal employees were supposed to be treated. Outside the office, word spread quickly. Ethan got fired. No warning? Seriously? Employees gathered near the glass windows. Some couldn't believe what they were hearing. Others looked afraid. If Ethan could be fired this easily, anyone could. Greg opened the office door. "You may leave now." Ethan picked up the envelope. For a few seconds, he simply stood there. The room was completely silent. Everyone expected him to argue, to yell, maybe even beg for another chance. Instead, he calmly reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, unlocked the screen, and dialed a number from memory. Greg laughed quietly. "Calling a lawyer?" Ethan looked up. A calm smile appeared on his face for the first time. "No. I'm calling someone who deserves to know what's happening." The line connected almost immediately. "Good morning. My name is Ethan Walker. I think it's time you reviewed what's been happening inside Harrison Logistics." There was a brief pause. Ethan listened carefully. Then he replied with just 6 words. "I'll wait right here for you." He ended the call, put the phone back into his pocket, and calmly took a seat in the waiting area outside the manager's office. Greg smirked. "You still don't understand, do you? You're just a former employee now." Ethan looked him straight in the eye, then quietly said, "We'll see." 30 minutes later, inside the conference room, everyone took their seats. Greg crossed his arms confidently. This meeting is unnecessary. The employee in question has already been terminated. The executive ignored him. Instead, he turned to Ethan. Would you explain? Ethan quietly placed a thick notebook on the table. It wasn't flashy. Its cover was worn from years of use. Inside, every page contained handwritten notes, dates, times, project numbers, maintenance records, risk assessments, emails, meeting summaries, for 12 years. Ethan had documented nearly every operational decision involving the company's distribution network. One executive flipped through the pages. His expression slowly changed. This is incredibly detailed. Ethan nodded. I started keeping records because problems were being ignored. The room projector turned on. A timeline appeared. 3 years earlier, Ethan had warned management about aging warehouse scanners, no action. 2 years earlier, he reported that several suppliers were bypassing quality inspections. Ignored. 18 months earlier, he recommended replacing outdated inventory software. Budget denied. 1 year earlier, he warned that delivery data was becoming unreliable. Management called it not urgent. Every warning had one thing in common. Someone had signed the document. Greg Harrison. The room grew quiet. Greg shifted in his chair. These were only recommendations. Ethan looked at him calmly. They became risks the moment no one acted. Ethan slid one last folder across the table. This is why I made that phone call. The executive opened it. Inside was an independent engineering report. It confirmed multiple failures in inventory tracking and quality control. If left unresolved, major clients could receive incorrect shipments, safety standards could be compromised, contract obligations might be violated. The executive looked at Greg. Did you know about these issues? Greg hesitated. They weren't critical. Ethan answered quietly. They became critical when they were ignored. That afternoon, Northbridge Global announced an immediate suspension of all new contracts with Harrison Logistics, not because Ethan called them, but because they now had credible evidence requiring an independent audit. The announcement spread quickly. Phones rang non-stop. Investors demanded explanations. Board members canceled meetings. News of the audit reached every department within hours. Employees whispered, "This isn't because Ethan was fired. It's because someone ignored years of warnings." For the first time, people realized Ethan hadn't caused the crisis. He had tried to prevent it. 2 weeks later, the board of directors arrived. Not for a celebration, for an investigation. Every manager was interviewed. Every email reviewed. Every maintenance request examined. Thousands of documents were analyzed. The audit lasted 12 days. When it ended, the findings shocked everyone. Poor oversight, ignored safety procedures, unauthorized budget decisions, missing compliance reports. Most importantly, investigators discovered dozens of emails from Ethan recommending practical solutions, each dismissed without proper review. The report stated clearly, there is no evidence that Ethan Walker contributed to these operational failures. Records show he repeatedly identified risks and proposed corrective actions. During the final board meeting, one email changed everything. It had been sent by Greg just 2 days before Ethan was fired. The message read, "If Walker stays, he'll continue challenging every decision. Remove him before the audit begins." The room fell silent. A board member slowly removed his glasses. So, this termination had nothing to do with performance. Another director nodded. It was an attempt to silence the person raising legitimate concerns. Greg tried to defend himself. "I was protecting the company." The chairman replied firmly. "No. You were protecting yourself." By the end of the week, Greg Harrison was dismissed. 2 senior managers resigned. Several internal policies were rewritten. A new compliance department was established. Employees gathered in the cafeteria, quietly discussing the changes. One young supervisor looked at Ethan and said, "You spent years protecting this company." And they fired the very person trying to save it. Ethan smiled gently. I wasn't trying to save a company. I was trying to protect the people who depended on it. The room fell silent. Those words stayed with everyone. 3 days later, Ethan received a phone call from the chairman of the board. "We'd like to meet." The chairman stood as Ethan entered the office. "I owe you an apology." He slid a contract across the table. "We want you back. Vice President of Operations. The position reports directly to the board. A higher salary. Full authority to rebuild the system." The chairman smiled. "The company needs someone like you." Ethan looked at the contract for a long moment. Then he gently pushed it back across the table. "I'm honored. But my answer is no." The chairman looked surprised. "May I ask why?" Ethan smiled. "For 12 years I gave this company my best. Now it's time to build something of my own." He stood, shook the chairman's hand, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back and said, "A title can be given. Trust has to be earned." The chairman remained seated, quietly reflecting on those words as Ethan walked out with his head held high. 3 months later, a small office overlooking the city officially opened its doors. There were no marble floors, no luxury furniture, no grand opening ceremony. Just a simple sign on the glass entrance. Walker Operations Consulting. Below it, a single sentence. Helping businesses build systems that people can trust. Emily smiled as she hung the company logo on the wall. Lily ran around the empty office, placing little drawings on Ethan's desk. One drawing caught his attention. It showed the 3 of them holding hands. Above their heads, Lily had written in colorful letters, "Daddy fixes problems." Ethan couldn't help but smile. Maybe. She was right. At first, there were only 2 clients, then 5, then 10. Business owners weren't looking for flashy presentations. They wanted someone who understood operations, someone honest, someone who had spent years solving problems instead of creating them. Word spread faster than Ethan expected, not because of advertising, but because every client recommended him to another. One afternoon, his receptionist walked into his office. "Mr. Walker, there are 3 visitors asking to see you." Ethan looked up, standing in the lobby. Were 3 familiar faces, former co-workers from Harrison Logistics. The first to speak was Maria. "I never should have stayed silent when they fired you." Ethan smiled gently. "You don't owe me an apology." She shook her head. "Maybe not, but I owe myself one." Another co-worker stepped forward. "We all watched you protect that company. And when you left, we realized the place wasn't the same." Maria smiled. "We heard you're hiring." Ethan laughed softly. "I wasn't planning on growing this quickly." The 3 exchanged nervous glances. "So, is that a yes?" Ethan looked around the office. There were still empty desks, empty computers, empty chairs. He smiled. "I think we've got room." The group laughed. For the first time in months, it felt like home again. 1 year passed. Walker Operations Consulting had grown from one small office into one of the fastest-growing logistics consulting firms in the region. More than 30 employees now worked there. Several were former colleagues who had chosen integrity over comfort. The office culture was different. Every employee had a voice. Problems were discussed openly. Ideas were welcomed. No one was afraid to speak up. On the conference room wall hung a simple framed quote. It wasn't from a famous CEO or a billionaire. It was something Ethan had written on the company's first day. "The best system is built by people who are never afraid to tell the truth." Every new employee read those words before their first meeting. One rainy afternoon, a black sedan stopped outside Ethan's office. The driver stepped out. It was Greg Harrison. He looked older, more tired, less confident than before. He waited in the reception area. When Ethan walked in, Greg slowly stood. "I wasn't sure you'd agree to see me." Ethan gestured toward a chair. "Sit down." For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Greg broke the silence. "I blamed everyone except myself. I thought leadership meant always being right. I was wrong." He looked down at his hands. "I lost my career. My reputation. And honestly, I deserved it. Ethan remained quiet. Greg continued, I didn't come here asking for a job. I came to apologize. A long silence followed. Then Ethan extended his hand. I accept your apology. Greg looked surprised. That's it? Ethan nodded. Holding on to anger won't change yesterday, but learning from it can change tomorrow. Greg shook his hand, then quietly walked away. It was the last time they ever met. That evening, Ethan picked Lily up from school. She jumped into the passenger seat with a huge smile. Dad, my teacher asked what you do. Ethan laughed. And what did you tell her? Lily thought for a second. I said, my dad helps people fix mistakes before they become disasters. Ethan smiled. I like that. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the skyline, father and daughter drove home. Not in a luxury car, not with flashing cameras, just two people who had learned that success wasn't measured by titles, or corner offices, or expensive suits. It was measured by character, by honesty, by the courage to do the right thing, even when nobody was watching. The screen slowly faded to black. One final sentence appeared. Never underestimate someone simply because they choose silence over arrogance. Professionalism, integrity, and character create a legacy that no title can replace.